Somewhere in Washington, D.C. in 1966, two men sat on a bench outside a Soviet residential compound and talked. They did not know they were being watched. They did not know they were being listened to. And they almost certainly never found out that the most sophisticated surveillance operation the United States government had ever attempted. 5 years of classified research, a team of surgeons and engineers and behavioral scientists, and somewhere in the range of $20 million had ended approximately 6 seconds after it began. What happened in those 6 seconds is, depending on who you ask, either the most expensive embarrassment in the history of American intelligence or a story that has been misremembered for decades. To understand how this happened, you have to understand what the CIA was facing in the early 1960s. The Soviet Union had become extraordinarily good at finding bugs. Their security teams swept embassy buildings for listening devices with increasing sophistication, using non-conductive building materials and dedicated dead rooms, spaces of total electronic isolation where sensitive conversations were held. Human intelligence was equally constrained. KGB surveillance of foreign nationals in Washington made it nearly impossible for any American operative to approach high-level Soviet officials without being identified. The result was a technical gap. The CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology needed a surveillance platform that was mobile and capable of operating in plain sight, something no electronic sweep would ever flag, because it was not technically a machine, it was a cat. It doesn't sound like a really dumb idea if you think about it. Cats were widespread in urban environments. They wandered freely in and out of embassy gardens and park areas. Security personnel ignored them. No electronic sweep calibrated for mechanical anomalies would register a living animal as a threat. If you could place a listening device inside the cat and direct that cat toward a target, you would have something extraordinary. A surveillance asset that moved through the world without suspicion, carrying its payload invisibly. This is what the Directorate of Science and Technology set out to build. The project was a joint operation between the CIA's Office of Technical Service and its Office of Research and Development. It operated under the broader institutional culture of the Wizards of Langley, a technical division defined by a radical belief that science could overcome any limitation, including biological ones. This was, after all, the same institutional environment that produced MK Ultra. The engineering challenge was significant. This was before the microchip. Every component had to be compressed by hand and made biocompatible, capable of surviving inside a living animal without causing rejection or infection. The prototype was a gray and white female cat. The surgery took approximately 1 hour. A microphone was implanted in the ear canal, using the cat's outer ear as a natural sound funnel. A radio transmitter, roughly 3/4 of an inch long, was embedded at the base of the skull. A fine wire antenna was woven through the fur along the spine and into the tail. The tail's length provided the physical span needed for a functional 1960s era radio antenna. Batteries were placed in the chest cavity, encased in biocompatible materials to prevent leakage. The engineers then ran into a problem no one had fully anticipated. The cat was too loud. The implanted microphones were sensitive enough to pick up the animal's own internal sounds, heartbeat, respiration, the movement of its digestive system, which overwhelmed any external audio. Specialized filters had to be developed to isolate human speech from the noise of the host's own body. The equipment also had to withstand grooming, scratching, and the cat's body temperature. Every solution introduced new problems. Every new problem required a new solution. After years of this, the project's engineers produced what their own closing memorandum would later call a remarkable scientific achievement. The cat was bug. The equipment worked. The transmission was clean. What they had not solved was the cat. The CIA understood that a transmitter was useless if it couldn't be aimed. To address this, they contracted Bob Bailey, a former Navy animal trainer, and his colleagues at Animal Behavior Enterprises, an organization with direct roots in the laboratory of B.F. Skinner. These were serious practitioners of operant conditioning, and they applied their methods deliberately. They developed a system of ultrasonic tones, inaudible to humans, to steer the cat in specific directions. They conditioned the animals to approach human voices and hold position near them. They desensitized the subjects to urban environments, walking them through busy airports and crowded streets. They were, by any reasonable measure, doing everything right. But there is one problem. Unlike dogs, cats are not socialized to seek human approval. Their instincts, hunger, curiosity, distraction, fighting other cats, do not yield to conditioning the way a dog's do. The cat would approach the target, then lose interest. It would sit precisely where it needed to sit, then wander away to investigate something else. The handlers could not override this. They could reduce it, shape it, but they could not eliminate it. The solution the CIA arrived at was, by any standard, remarkable in its implications. They performed a second surgical procedure to suppress the cat's hunger drive. The logic was that a hungry cat would prioritize food over its operational directive. A cat that was neurologically incapable of feeling hunger would stay on task. This is the point at which the project becomes something other than merely strange. In 1966, after 5 years of development, the cat was deemed ready. The target was simple: 2 men on a bench outside the Soviet residential compound on Wisconsin Avenue. The cat was transported to the site in a surveillance van equipped with receiving antennas and recording equipment. The handlers opened the door. They deployed the ultrasonic cues. The cat crossed the street and was struck by a taxi. This is the account given by Victor Marchetti, a former CIA officer who described the mission in some detail after leaving the agency. It is the version that has circulated for decades. The $20 million cat killed in seconds. Its expensive electronic payload lost in the street. An operative rushing out of the van to retrieve the remains before Soviet security or the DC police could examine them. However, it may not be entirely accurate. In 2013, Robert Wallace, the former director of the Office of Technical Service, publicly disputed the Marchetti account. According to Wallace, the taxi incident never happened. The project was not ended by an accident but was ended by a rational assessment. The training was deemed too unreliable for deployment in actual foreign operations. The equipment was surgically removed. The cat lived out the remainder of its life without incident. Wallace's version is tidier. It is also, notably, better for the agency's image, both in terms of animal welfare and institutional competence. Critics have observed that it arrives suspiciously late, attributed to a former official with an obvious interest in rehabilitation. What both accounts agree on is this: the project failed. The 1967 closing memorandum, partially declassified in 2001 through a Freedom of Information Act request by the National Security Archive, concluded that while cats could be trained to move short distances toward a target, the combination of environmental variables and animal behavior made the technique impractical for intelligence purposes. The memo praised the project's technical team for their achievement. It did not address the $20 million. The project did not really end the CIA's interest in biological surveillance. The lesson of Acoustic Kitty was not that organisms could not be weaponized. It was that mammals were the wrong choice. Cats are autonomous. They have competing drives, complex instincts, and an independence that resists external control. The solution, pursued in subsequent decades through DARPA programs that trace a direct lineage edge to this project was simpler organisms, insects, animals with nervous systems rudimentary enough to be directly overridden by implanted neural hardware, rather than merely influenced through conditioning. The goal, a mobile, invisible surveillance platform that operates in plain sight, has never been abandoned. It has only become more sophisticated. The closing memorandum called the work a remarkable scientific achievement. In one sense, that assessment is defensible. The engineers did what they set out to do. They achieved clean audio transmission. They built something that technically worked. What they could not engineer was the animals' indifference to their intentions. The mission failed to account for the cat. There is a version of this story in which $20 million buys a lesson about the limits of the technical fix. The institutional belief that any problem, including a biological one, can be solved with sufficient resources and innovation. The CIA in the 1960s operated as though those limits did not exist. The gray and white cat wandering across Wisconsin Avenue with a transmitter at the base of its skull and a wire running the length of its spine was the proof that they did. Whether it was killed by a taxi or quietly retired to a comfortable life in the suburbs depends on who you ask. Either way, it never made it to the bench.